One of my absolute favorite series that I did last year on this channel was taking famous cartoon characters and anime characters and rewriting them and redesigning them onto DC's Suicide Squad. And I'd planned to return to that series when the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video game came out, but that game got delayed, so this series kind of just sat on the shelf for a little while. But it's a fantastic month to be a DC fan because Gotham Knights is coming out, I'm super excited for that, Black Adam as well, so I figured this was as good a time as any to bring back my Suicide Squad series with an idea that lots of my subscribers have asked me for, taking famous video game characters and putting them on the Suicide Squad. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's go.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
In Gotham City, there are plenty of criminal groups and organizations. Some are backed by powerful leaders, whether physically or financially, but there is one thing that can often make or break a group and keep them afloat even when a vigilante sets their sights on bringing them to justice. Good management. It may not be an exciting part of criminal life, but it is essential, and one organization in particular, for some time, had a very adept manager running the show behind the group's leader. Isabelle, who nowadays goes more commonly by Izzy, was a metahuman born with traits that made her resemble a humanoid dog. She had greater speed than your average human, as well as claws that could potentially be dangerous, but overall her mutation was largely aesthetic. This, of course, didn't stop many from being concerned about what she could do. Gotham City didn't have a great relationship with metahumans. Coming up through school, Izzy was picked on quite a bit for how she appeared, but it didn't bother her much as she was highly focused on her schooling. She was an unbeatable student who finished high school at 15 and went to Gotham University with her sights set on becoming the mayor of Gotham, ready to take whatever steps necessary to get there. Near the end of her schooling, with the best grades Gotham U had ever seen, Izzy applied for a position to become the assistant to the current mayor, but she was rejected. She remained undeterred and applied to the next position that came up in Town Hall. Her interview went fantastically, and she was again rejected. This pattern continued for months and slowly chipped away at Izzy's demeanor until she had to demand an answer. She got herself a meeting with the Town Hall manager, a droopy-eyed, ill-qualified man named Thomas Nook, to discuss how she could finally find work, anything in Town Hall to get her career underway. But after being pried for information, the man was frank with her and said that it wasn't going to happen for Izzy. She was being rejected at every turn because hiring her, a visible metahuman, would bring too much negative press in a city where the main heroes were people with no superhuman abilities and metahumans were seen as a threat. She was alarmed and disheartened. That day forced Izzy to take a look at who she was trying to get under the employ of. She knew she was worthy of great respect for her managerial skills and work ethic, and if she wasn't going to get that respect in public office, she'd find it somewhere else. She started looking further into Gotham's criminal underground, making meetings with the Falcone crime family, the Maronis. At first, those she met with tried to convince her to use her metahuman strengths to help them, but she insisted on running operations, a position no group seemed willing to grant to a newcomer. Until she finally discovered the perfect person to pitch her case to. Izzy got herself face to Two-Face with Harvey Dent, once a hard-working district attorney turned crime lord. She told him of her disenchantment with Town Hall and of how she could manage every aspect of his criminal empire and help it become a well-oiled machine, rising to the ranks of the most feared and revered group in Gotham. As someone who'd held a place in public office, Dent was well aware of how a good manager could keep a ship sailing smoothly. Her pitch was too good to pass up, and for the next year, Izzy reorganized Two-Face's people, found them new hideouts, paid off the right police, brought in more members, all while managing to keep tabs on the movements and actions of Gotham's vigilante Bat family to keep the higher-ranking members of Two-Face's crew out of their path. For a while, anyhow. It took quite some time, but Batman and his allies eventually got enough information out of some of Two-Face's lackeys to learn that Dent's organization had been growing so rapidly due to Izzy's hard work. They set their sights on her and eventually brought her down. She was sent to Belle Reve on multiple criminal charges, but it hardly dampened her spirits, as soon after being incarcerated she was approached by Amanda Waller to help run operations of Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad. Just like that, Izzy was back to doing what she loved, and on top of all of that, she made a very close and unexpected friend her first day in prison. A man who'd arrived the same day as her, and who would help her embrace her metahuman strengths, showing her that her little claws had a lot of potential to rip and tear. Izzy's new friend had a rough go of things before finding himself in Belle Reve, and had gotten locked away for an act that had made worldwide headlines, but had been something he'd done for the greater good, in his opinion. You see, a few months prior, Damon Blaskowitz had been dishonorably discharged from military service for refusing a direct order in the field, then acting in direct contradiction to those orders. It didn't matter that the reason he'd refused was because he was being made to fire upon a civilian population. He was out and in need of work. He got a position that sounded promising and unusual that few people had been willing to take on, becoming armed security on a Mars base built by LexCorp to do some of their experiments that Earth governments would have shut down. He spent much of his time in this role patrolling the base, but did get in some combat situations as white Martians attacked the compound. But that was nothing compared to the action that he was going to be faced with soon. LexCorp had scientists on the base trying to harness power from a mother box, a device sought by the most dangerous being in the universe, Darkseid. And tampering with this machine eventually led his forces right to the LexCorp base. An experiment on the box went wrong, and a boom tube was opened to Darkseid's homeworld of Apokolips. Swarms of his parademons came through, killing everyone in sight. Damon shredded through whole waves of them on his own as other guards fell around him, but he soon after saw that some of the demons were taking prisoners through the tube, and one was even stealing the mother box. He followed the parademons through to Apokolips and continued rampaging through the demons. He spent days on Apokolips, even taking armor off some of the parademons he slayed to enhance his own suit. Eventually, he even fought his way right into Darkseid's throne room, where the mother box had been taken. There, he challenged a being that even Superman could not defeat. Damon was, of course, unable to kill Darkseid, but astoundingly avoided being killed himself, and managed to steal back the Mother Box and use it to return to Mars. Not wanting to risk using the Mother Box again, he took one of the base's still functional lightspeed crafts back to Earth, and brought the box back to the main LexCorp towers to explain what had transpired. He was thanked for his work and offered significant promotion, but soon after accepting, he found out that under Lex Luthor's direct orders, they were going to continue experimentation on the Mother Box. Damon's protests were ignored, and soon he turned to physical threats, stating that this was far too dangerous. They ignored him, then fired him. But if Lex Luthor wouldn't listen to him, then Lex Luthor had to go. He forced his way right into Lex Luthor's own office, and Luthor, though not expecting the man, was prepared for any threat coming his way. Or so he thought. He donned his own power armor, built to face off against Superman, and yet, even that couldn't save him from the Slayer that challenged him. Damon put a hole right through Luthor's head. Every station soon after was sharing the news. Lex Luthor was dead, killed by a disgruntled and unstable ex-employee. It didn't matter that Damon's intent was to protect the world from the threat of Darkseid's forces. Murder was still murder. That was how Damon came to find himself in Belle Reve, recruited onto the Suicide Squad and finding himself becoming unexpected friends with Izzy. He taught her to be more field-ready if she ever decided to use her metahuman strengths, and she ensured that he was always put on the missions he desired, whenever there was a new opportunity to rip and tear for the good of his world. Like so many others in Belle Reve, Min-Min had had good intentions with the actions that brought her on the wrong side of the law. She'd grown up to a poor single mother in Central City who ran a small ramen noodle shop that was often barely keeping afloat. Min-Min and her mother had a good relationship despite all their financial struggles, and the fact that having a child hadn't exactly been a consideration on her mother's radar when she became pregnant. Min Min had been the result of a one-night stand with a man that Min Min's mother had never seen again, who she never found out was the once small-time crook turned superhero Plastic Man. Unfortunately, seeing as how his powers came about as the result of falling into a vat of dangerous chemicals, the genetic translation of his abilities to the daughter he never learned he had was far from seamless. Min Min was born with only the ability to stretch her arms, which were unusually green and scaly, and unfortunately she had very little control over them when they were outstretched. So long as she kept her arms retracted, they were usable as normal, so her mother simply encouraged her to keep her powers quiet, and she did that for most of her early life. But by the time Min Min was 13, her mother's restaurant started falling on particularly hard times, and she decided she had to find a way to help her mother out, and figured her powers might be an asset in that task. Min Min had heard rumblings from some of her shadier friends of an underground metahuman fight club, sometimes referred to as the Ultimate Smash. Coincidentally, Izzy from our prior tale had been running the Gotham arm of this fight ring in her time working for Two-Face, but it had since evolved to a grander scale, occurring in many cities and attracting fighters from all across the country. Visiting one of the brawls to see what it was like and how much money the competitors could earn if victorious, Min Min decided to start asking around for anyone who could help her with her abilities. She eventually got an audience with a man helping run the Central City arm of this fighting ring, Maxwell Brass. She told him that she was willing to fight, but couldn't control her powers. They ended up coming to an agreement. If his people could help her find a way to control her abilities, she'd fight for him and give him a cut of her profits. She agreed, and it wasn't long before Brass's tech people, who had a lot of experience with metahumans as it was, had studied Min Min and developed a specialized helmet. This helmet held the connections in her brain to her abilities more stable. With it on, her arms could be stretched at great distances and coil into springs, able to fire out at remarkable speeds. Thereafter, she started fighting, and it wasn't long before she was a crowd favorite in the Central City fighting ring, earning enough money to help her mother out with the bills and attracting a lot of admittedly shady but still well-paying customers to the ramen shop from the Ultimate Smash crowd. All was going well until Brass decided Min Min's abilities could be used for more lucrative purposes. He tried to talk her into helping some of his people rob a gold shipment moving through town that night. She tried to refuse, but he said if she did, he'd take her helmet back and make sure she never stepped foot in the ring again. Reluctantly, she agreed, and unfortunately for her, Central City's resident speedster, the Flash, was keeping watch over the shipment. And while Min Min was an able fighter, she was no match for a seasoned member of the Justice League. Min Min was taken down and arrested. Her mother was devastated, but understanding of why her daughter had done what she'd done. Min Min's mother being so kind about the whole situation made Min Min that much more desperate to get out and get home as soon as possible. Hence her striking a deal with Amanda Waller to reduce her prison sentence by becoming the stretchiest new member of Task Force X. Whatever exactly was done to make Argus Subject 1170, sometimes referred to as Huggy Wuggy, into what he is today is still unknown. He doesn't even remember his own name or anything about himself prior to being captured by notorious Gotham serial killer, the Dollmaker. The Dollmaker, Barton Mathis, had grown up with a twisted mind after being tormented by his murderous cannibal father. A twisted childhood created a twisted adult, and in his grown-up years he'd murdered dozens of people, biologically altered children to try and make them into living weapons, and eventually undertook the experiments of which Huggy was a part. Mathis had already been locked away in Arkham Asylum once before by the Batman, and upon escaping decided he needed a new way to protect himself as he conducted his work. He made himself a new home in an old abandoned toy factory in Bloodhaven. The company that ran it had been called Playtime Co. and had gone under in the 60s. There he lured in a group of test subjects. Subject 1170 was one of those poor souls. Barton managed to genetically alter this poor man and the others captured into humanoid versions of the Playtime Co. toys. Huggy had become a 10-foot-tall, hairy monster that couldn't control his actions when he was hungry, so the Dollmaker ensured that he was always ravenous. If he was unchained and in the vicinity of another person or creature while hungry, Huggy would charge at them and try to devour them. Huggy and the other experiments then served as guards, patrolling the factory for intruders. Eventually, some unexpected guests did enter the facility, and with tears streaming down his face, unable to control his body, Huggy sprinted at them, baring his jagged teeth. Luckily, the intruders could fend for themselves. Batgirl and Nightwing were following up on a kidnapping case when they had this run-in with Huggy. While he did have dramatically enhanced strength and durability, they'd faced worse and were able to restrain him and eventually take down the Dollmaker, freeing the children he'd kidnapped. Mathis was taken back to Arkham, and his experiments were taken to Argus, an organization that researched metahuman experiments and conducted some of their own. When they fed Huggy soon after his arrival, he finally was able to calm down and gain control of himself for the first time since being taken. He told them that he had no memory of his time prior to the Dollmaker's experiments. Whatever the Dollmaker had done had wiped his mind. But he did know that he didn't want to hurt anyone. Anyone innocent, that is. He did have an understandably strong hatred for the Dollmaker, and was furious to learn not a month later that he had once more escaped from Arkham in a jailbreak that loosed dozens of criminal psychopaths back into the streets. While he was a largely peaceful soul, Huggy didn't believe a man like the Dollmaker deserved a second chance, and should have been killed for his crimes. After expressing this opinion, Huggy was soon approached by Amanda Waller, who just so happened to be a leader of Argus. She came to him with a proposal. While Argus was still seeking a way to correct his condition and turn him back to his normal self, she told him he could do some real good by joining her Task Force X in their covert missions to hunt down and kill people like the Dollmaker so they could never hurt anyone else again. Huggy agreed to this on one very important condition, that she ensure before every mission he was very well fed. He'd only use his powers for good, and never again allow them to use him.
I am so glad that I came back to this series, because this was great, and let me know what you liked better, this or my famous video game characters as Spider-Man villains episode from a few weeks ago. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote from Rumi, which says that your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against love. I could elaborate on what that one means to me, but I think it's a really good thinker that if you have a moment, you might want to ponder what it means to you. I hope that's helpful or inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all. Videos come out Mondays and Fridays and sometimes Wednesdays, so I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.